works with our early development network, and we serve our children birth to 3. And we're fortunate that we actually have with us today Brooke Martin as a part of Munroe-Meyer Institute, and Jennifer Hansen as well, as part of our planning region team, but also MMI, to do some presentations for us. So thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy. Make sure you're ready to answer any questions. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Brooke.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So as some of you may know, my background is in early childhood and special education, and I have a passion for early childhood mental health and infant mental health, and also attachment and trauma, and how it really affects development, and how working with parents can really help enhance development, how developing connection between parents and children can influence how children grow and learn, and can really help children learn to regulate. And so our session today, we're going to talk about infancy and how connection and parental mental health can really help enhance regulation for infants. So attachment really begins in utero. The mother or the parent's beliefs and thoughts about their pregnancy really start to shape this bond that the parent and the child have together. And so it's really beginning, those thoughts and those feelings really begin right as soon as the mother develops an idea of the baby. And that's when the foundation for attachment is really formed. So if the mother and the baby are healthy and the mom has positive feelings towards the fetus, there's this healthy attachment that begins to form. But that is not always the case. Sometimes the baby is a surprise. Sometimes, the parent is not excited about the idea of being pregnant, or sometimes there's just circumstances that are really difficult for the family when the mother finds out that she's pregnant. If mom is struggling in stress, this affects the beginning of that attachment and affects the beginning of that brain development for the child. So if the mom is carrying a lot of stress in her body during those early months of fetal development, that increases cortisol in her body, and then it increases cortisol in the baby's body and the baby's brain. And that really starts to develop the baby's neurological system and sets up the baby's sort of blueprint for regulation. And then, of course, once the baby is born, there's other factors that affect attachment. So we want to consider, what was that birth like? Did everything go along with the birth plan, or was it a traumatic birth? And what were the few days, weeks, and months like following that birth? Were parent or mother able really to bond during that time? Or was it a really difficult time for mother and baby? Was mom feeling a lot of flooded emotions and flooded hormones? Was baby, really struggling in that time? Was baby in the NICU during that time? And did that mean that, parents were separated from their child, which can be a really difficult period for the family? So really thinking about what do those first few weeks and months look like for the child and the parent. And again, that's going to influence attachment. If baby was removed from the parent or the mother right away, right after birth, that can, influence bonding. If baby's taken right away into the NICU and mom isn't able to be directly in charge of cares for the baby. And, all of this is affecting the second parent, if there is one, the father or the other partner. They're trying to, develop their own relationship with their new baby. And there are actually physiological changes for them as well. Studies show that there's increased cortisol for them as well. And there's hormonal shifts for them as well, even if they're not the one birthing the child. So really important to think about how these things are affecting attachment. And there's no situation where it's just like, all hunky-dory and all beautiful. I think the thing we're really looking for is there some consistency in being able to go through a stressful period, go through a stressful event in your life, and then being able to come back to your child and reconnect. And that's what we're going to keep talking about, is that ability to come back and reconnect with your child is really what forms this basis for continuing to regulate and this basis for strong, secure attachment. So your baby knows that no matter what's happening with mommy may feel sad, mommy may be frustrated, mommy may need to take a break, but mommy's always going to be coming back to reconnect with me. And so we just want to highlight that life gets stressful, life gets hard, you're not always feeling super awesome about parenthood, and that's okay. It's really about the reconnection piece that creates resiliency. And then when the newborn period starts to wear off and the parents find themselves getting, just out of this haze of chaos, we start to see some of these rhythms develop, and we start to see some of these little pieces of personality develop in this newborn baby. And this leads the way to what we call temperament. So temperament is something that is talked about a lot in early childhood, and definitely talked a lot about by pediatricians. It's made up of 9 different categories. And so we'll talk about those today, because it's really important to think about when you are thinking about what is typical for a child. We really want to consider what is typical for that child. And each child is its own child. And when we think about a child that is, sometimes you hear the orchid versus the dandelion. The orchid is the more sensitive child, the child who may be sensitive to loud noises or overwhelming crowds and may need a little bit of time to warm up. And the dandelion is the really active child who just will go up and meet anybody and can just be thrown around and thrashed around and is never really bothered by anything. And that is a typical comparison in early childhood, in the early childhood world, that makes you think about, what might be upsetting for the orchid would not even register for the dandelion. So that's why I want to talk about temperament here. And so one of the big ones is activity level. Is your child, climbing out of his crib at 9 months, like my daughter was? Or are they happy to still be in their crib at 4 years old, staring at the ceiling when they wake up in the morning? So there's a big, difference there. Distractibility. Is your child one of these potty trainers who's happy to just sit on the potty and read, some books for 10 or 15 minutes and try and go potty? Or was your child more like mine and would just like refuse to ever sit on the potty because it just took too much time to sit there, and would move from one thing to another? So the other thing is regularity. So like predictability of functions and behavioral patterns. So like there's some kids you just know they're gonna have a bowel movement every day at 3 o'clock. And then other kids where it's just going to be much more unpredictable, or the kid who really does get tired and ready for bed at the same time every day, or wakes up at the same time every morning at 5:30, no matter what happens. They're really regular. We talked about the sensitivity piece. Approachability. How does the child receive other children? Are they really shy, or they're eager to go and engage? Adaptability. When you change their routine, how do they do with that? Does it just really rock their world, or are they pretty even, like easygoing, and their routine can be shifted and it doesn't bother them much? Persistence. How long will they stick with an activity before giving up? Can they engage, at the preschool level in a game? Or do they just give up the first time they try? And moodiness. Does their mood shift really quick from one activity to another? So you start to see, right around 4 months, I think, this temperament pieces in your baby, and that's what makes up personality, right? And so if you're reading your baby's cues, this is an exciting time because you start to see, you realize that like there's these unique things about your baby that that you didn't notice before. And it's a wonderful time to recognize these things, because if we can recognize what your baby is needing, then we can lean into their cues, and then we can really start to help them regulate. The idea that a baby should learn to regulate on their own is a myth. Babies learn to regulate through their human mother or father or caregiver. And it is the process of co-regulation that teaches regulation. And even as humans, we need that. We do not learn to regulate on our own. We regulate through our partners. We regulate through our children sometimes. We regulate through pets. We regulate through touch and connection of our friends and the people around us. So when you hear people say, your baby should learn to calm themselves, your baby should learn to go to sleep on their own, your baby should learn to do all of these things, it's actually like not true. Your baby learns through you. So you are the one that teaches your baby that co-regulation. So here we can talk about ways to regulate your child. I could do a whole session on sleeping and eating. And really, there are people, you know, on the one end that it's like, okay, we're going to go to bed every day at 8 p.m. and we're going to wake up at 6 a.m. And then and if that works for them and their baby, then that works for them. And then there are people that are going to do, we're going to eat every 4 hours, and then we're going to, you know, sleep after the third feeding. And it doesn't matter which one you choose, as long as it's working for you and your baby, and as long as it's consistent. So you just have to choose one and make sure that you're following some sort of routine. When things get really chaotic and you're not getting the rest that you need and your baby's not getting the rest that you need, most babies at 4 months are needing, I think it's 18 to 20 hours a night. If they're not getting that amount of sleep, then it's really important to reconsider how to get the amount of sleep that you need. And if parents aren't getting, you know, at that amount of the 8 to 9 hours that you need, depending on what you need, then it's time to reconsider whether the strategy you're using is working for you. Another thing that's really important, going on walks during the day. If parents don't want to go on walks, if moms or dad or caregiver is just too exhausted to do a walk, then at least get outside for some sunshine. The sunshine will start to shift the circadian rhythm and build up melatonin, which will help regulate the sleep cycle. So right around 4 months of age for infants, the sleep cycle starts to regulate on its own. But having light and sunshine during the day helps significantly regulate that cycle. In addition, it's like basically giving your child a dose of melatonin in the sunshine. And it's really good for you too as a parent. So get outside, get some sunshine. Walking is great for your heart, but if you can't walk because you're so exhausted, at least get out in the backyard. And this is a great time for active play. Make sure that you're giving your baby time to be on his or her tummy, time to be on the floor where they are not kept in a swing or a boppy, where they're just actively moving on their back or their tummy, and they are really engaging in gross motor play. This is going to be the most engaging brain development time for them. Their brain is most focused on gross motor at this time. And so what you're doing for your baby at this time when they're awake is maximizing their brain development. You're exhausting their brain. So they're going to be nice and tired by the time that playtime's over. They're going to sleep well, and they're going to be doing exactly what their body should be doing during that wake time, which is learning how to move, to reach, to engage in their environment. So really making sure you're giving them that opportunity. A lot of families are like, you know, I want them upright. I want them to see what's going on. I want to see them. But really, we don't give our babies enough floor time. So that is my my encouragement for floor time. And then really encouraging lots of rhythmic movement to help soothe. So if you have a baby that's really fussy and, you know, is just, it's the witching hour and you're not sure what to do with them, go to rhythmic movement for soothing. If it can be on you, that's great. If you can baby wear, that's great, because being close to you, you can be the co-regulator. If you're calm, If you're agitated and you're making dinner and it's frustrating to wear your baby, don't wear your baby, because that's just going to make your baby more frustrated. But if you feel pretty like, you know, wearing your baby is a pleasurable experience, then wear your baby, because the movement of your body is rhythmic and it feels good for your baby. Other alternatives could be a swing or a mama-roo, if you can't rock your baby yourself. So the ultimate is to co-regulate through rocking on your body. But if you're not in the mood for it, put your baby down and let something else rock your body, because your baby's going to know and feel when you're agitated. And that's the time for you to take a break and give yourself a break. Because what your baby needs is a calm version of yourself and a regulated version of yourself. And it's better for your baby to have a little break from you until you can give them that than it is for you to try and push through and be super mom. Because none of us can be super mom. We all need a break sometimes. I wrote some notes about just reading our baby's cues around lighting and sound. So this goes back to the dandelion and the orchid. The orchid might show you some cues like turning away from bright lights and bright sounds and loud sounds, sorry. And the orchid might just like love it, like more sound, more light, look towards it, love dancing, love the sound. So reading their cues about that, because if a child's really overwhelmed with the lighting and the sound, their brain is going to kind of shut down a little bit, and it's going to be hard for them to learn. And we want to protect that calm space for learning for them, so that when they're having that calm, quiet wake time, that it's really a great learning time for them. And then here I just say, you know, see if you can kind of pay attention to your own breath and your own feelings about when you get overwhelmed in motherhood. This is especially true when you have more than one child. And this is sort of the path to just greater reflection in our own journey in motherhood. I think you're not always going to be able to do something about it, but it's like, this is laying the groundwork. When your child is a baby, it's taking a break and walking away. When your child is 6, it's saying, mommy's frustrated and I need to go have a break. And when your child's older, it's being able to, like, you know, have a conversation with your child about feelings. So this is the social emotional groundwork. And I think it's really important in being able to help model for our children that we're human and that we get overwhelmed and that it's okay to take a break and that we can come back together and love each other and be in a safe place when we come back together. So here's some more information about crying and why babies do it. Obviously, it's a form of communication, but also it just releases cortisol. And sometimes babies cry and they're not trying to communicate anything to us. They're just crying and it's a release for them. And this is hard, I think, to understand as a parent, because it's like you're trying to figure out what is wrong with my child. They have a clean diaper. I fed them. They took a nap. They don't have a fever. I'm rocking them. What else is going on? And this is the part where we say, like, within reason, there's going to be some crying involved in having an infant. it can be difficult. But when you know that, and you know that a certain amount of crying is normal, that there's a reason for it, you can expect it, and it's not so overwhelming. And then maybe, Jennifer, you could make this video like a little bit bigger. And this is just a video, like you could drag the corners to make it bigger. Or not, you can just play it. Can everyone hear it?
Can you guys hear it?
Mm.
Oh, no. Okay.
There's no sound.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I was like enjoying the video. Sorry, give me 1 second and I'll see if I can exit and share my screen here. Okay. I'm gonna share this. Can you hear that? No?
No.
Okay, how about I put the link in the chat box and then, or I can send it out with the follow-up email. 'Cause I don't know if you can copy things out of the chat box.
Sure, that works.
Okay,
This is
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's probably my fault. It's just a little video about reading babies' cues. And I always think it's nice to have a visual in these presentations, so it's not just me talking. But it's nice to see, examples of, what does it look like when baby's clearly telling you that is overstimulating for me. And there's one example where like the 3-year-old toddler comes up and gives baby like a big kiss on the face, and then baby starts crying, and it's like, it's obviously a little overwhelming for baby, and it's difficult to always read baby's cues, right? Like there's in a perfect world, and then there's real life. And I'm sorry that you don't like your car seat right now, but we have to go to the grocery store. And so I don't want this to sound like you have to read baby's cues all the time, or your child isn't going to have secure attachment. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when we can create quiet times in our day, maybe 10 minutes here or there, where we zone in on reading our baby's cues, it helps build secure attachment. And some of the statistics look like this. If you meet your baby's cues or your child's cues 30% of the time, that is enough to build secure attachment. So, just to put it in context, we're not talking about 100% of the time here. We're talking 30%. That seems doable. When I know I would get overwhelmed hearing some of this, is like, I can't do that all the time. Like, that's ridiculous. But 30% feels like, okay, like I can do it 30% of the time. That's what it takes to build secure attachment. So So yeah, keep that in mind. And then there's those situations where there's going to be families and parents where it doesn't work and they actually have a case where there is something going on developmentally and their child is not neurotypical, or there is something going on there's mental health issues, or there's abuse and neglect issues, and the family might feel really, really overwhelmed and they don't know how to meet this child's needs. And so that's the time that you need to seek help. And so I put the Nebraska Family Helpline here. They have some support for preventing shaken baby syndrome, and also for moms that are just feeling, overwhelmed, having signs of anxiety or depression, that it's never a bad idea to have a therapist or to have someone to talk to about how overwhelming it can be to be a parent to young children, and have somebody to talk about coping strategies with. And I just think that's always a great support. So Psychology Today is a good resource for trying to find someone that's covered under your insurance. And then if you ever have concerns that your baby, isn't meeting developmental milestones, like if your child is like not sitting up by age 6 months, or your child's not learning to crawl, or you're really concerned that they're not meeting developmental milestones, then I would suggest you contact the Early Development Network. That's the EDN, and they work with young children who have delays in development, and they come into your home and they do evaluation free of charge, and they provide support to you and your child, and they're a really great resource as well. And so I think the other piece about this is really, I have to remind myself of this all the time because I'm a working parent, and it's just, there's so much energy to just try and like get through the day and get through the logistics of the day. But really trying to find times where I can really just have fun with my child and be silly with my child. It's those moments where we are having fun together, where I am experiencing and releasing oxytocin in my brain and body, and then my child is too. So that is the bonding hormone. And that oxytocin is what builds secure attachment as well. So the more times that you can catch yourself having fun with your child, snuggling with your child, being silly with your child, doing something that you and your child really love doing together. I remember my child was adopted from foster care. So, we had to work really hard to get secure attachment. It didn't happen naturally the way it does with other parents and children. And I remember our play therapist, telling me, like, because I would feel like she just wanted to get on the floor and play. And I'm an early childhood teacher. So I would go to work all day and play with all these kids. And then I'd come home and my daughter would want to play again. And I'd be like, I just don't want to play anymore. And I remember her telling me, like, you don't have to do what she wants to do. Like, is there something you guys can do together that you both really love doing that isn't playing? Because I just hated playing. And I was getting sick of it. We came up with swimming because we both really like going swimming in the pool. And so that was it. It was an activity. it didn't have to be like something that I didn't enjoy doing. It was an activity that we both enjoyed. And so we started having swimming dates together, and that was our bonding time. So if you feel like you're struggling to find time, or it's hard to think about what are these activities that we can do together, like he likes to play dinosaurs and I don't know how to play dinosaurs, really start to brainstorm what are some activities you can do together, that both of you can enjoy doing, because those are the moments when the oxytocin is released, and that's when the bonding really happens. And then, I don't know, I just love this picture. I think about this pretty much every day, because as a parent, you're doing all the things every day to plant the seeds, and you don't know if they're going to bloom. And it's going to be a long time before you see if they're going to bloom. So, I don't know. I felt like this was a moment we could all take camaraderie in being parents, and recognizing that this is an act of bravery, and it's an act of faith, and that building attachment, one block at a time, or one brick at a time, and building connection really is about planting these little seeds and hoping that when the preteen years come, we've built enough of a connection to our child that, they're going to come to us about the real important things, because we laid the foundation here. So that is what I have to present to you guys. I would love for you to ask some questions and maybe share some experiences and do some, problem solving, or be able to offer some ideas. If you have questions or situations you would love some information for.
Well, I know that I got a preview of your wonderful slides, and I just want to say, I wish that I would have had this information when my children were younger, especially my first one. When you're a first-time parent, you don't always understand the cues, or knowing that each child has their own temperament. I think after having multiple children, which feels like millions at this point, there's only 3, but to know that they have their own temperament is very interesting, and that the nature versus nurture can be a fun little thing that life throws at you. I do want to say, like, the temperament piece, that intrigued me, especially when maybe your baby or your child's or your teenager's temperament doesn't match your own. If they have, maybe their parents, their other parents' temperament, it can be, it can be a challenge to try and work with that.
Yeah. I think that's a whole nother topic we could do a whole session on, is like when there's a disconnect between parental temperament and child temperament. And really, I think there's a whole focus on when the child is an extrovert and the parent is an introvert, or the opposite, that can be very difficult to manage. There's just it can be really hard when there's that disconnect, and finding ways for your child to get their needs met while you also need to get your needs met. Mm-hmm.
I also honed in on that temperament, and my family experience was the temperament was very laid back, not fussy, but then it started to get where didn't want to be held, didn't want to be touched. And it was like, wait a minute, this is beyond laid back. There's an issue. And how to recognize that, my son regulated very well, had a routine. Now it's OCD routine, based on his disability. But as a baby, as an infant, it was very difficult as a new parent to recognize that regulation was going beyond that. And that it really was, as long as the routine was good, everything was fine. And that's when we began to notice, when routines began to change, that, wait a minute, maybe there's an issue. And so I think that's important for parents to recognize, and like I said, we thought everything was going great. Everything was fine. What a good baby we had. And, and like I said, and we still battle with the OCD, and he's 31 now. So there's issues sometimes around that regulation and that temperament.
When you were talking about the temperament piece too, it made me kind of think about how we as parents, when we may have our children in childcare somewhere, what's our understanding of that piece as a joint team around a child? Because I may know something as a parent, but how do I communicate that to a childcare provider? And the same thing, it's like our days are kind of centered around them. So how do we think about what are we seeing in all these different settings that kids can be in, so that we're all on the same page about how we support an infant and a toddler around those areas of development?
Yeah.
And I guess that'd be one thing you think about, well, I didn't think about having conversations about temperament with my child care provider. I just, here we go, off you go. But then I'm thinking now maybe that would have been, ways to think about that for what do I know about that soothing piece, or what do I know about their temperament, so that I can make sure that they know that too. So,
or vice versa. Is a child care provider letting parents know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Temperament and those types of things. And are child care providers trained to look for those things? We see a lot of high school and college age young men and women in the child care profession, and do they really understand? Are they receiving training in those areas to really provide good care and not just be an eye, like hiring a babysitter for 3 hours to go out. We don't expect them to pay attention, but as a child care provider on a daily basis, while both parents are working, I'm not in that field. So, but it definitely raises the questions: are they properly trained to look for things and to communicate with parents, so that that child is learning how to regulate, and so that when the child gets home, or the parents understanding that they've just, that child care provider spent the last 8 hours with them, and I'm going to get maybe 4 or 5 before that child goes to bed. Who's spending the majority of the time with that child? And are they communicating temperament issues or regulation issues, and those kinds of things? And then the parent starts to say, well, that's a bad daycare because my child is this way and it's not what we expected. There could be a lot of confusion in there without that proper communication and training, I believe.
And I think we have some amazing child care providers, and so that are just naturally intuitive about children's temperaments too. And so how do we make sure we communicate that when you have working parents that are working 8 hours a day? And I have an insight as a child care provider about just, this is what's happening with them, and this is what I've noticed about them. So yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions or anything else they'd like to share?
I do have one question, Bert. How much do
Siblings influence temperament of other siblings?
I wouldn't say that siblings influence temperament. I would say that siblings can influence moods.
Or behavior.
And there are philosophies, especially, in the 80s and 90s, there's definitely strong philosophies about firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn children and how that affects personality. But it's not current research based. It's like more in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. I would say that the current research doesn't say that it's true for its basis. Yeah.
So maybe all along it was really just related to the temperament piece of each individual child and how every one of them is so different,
Yeah.
Well, and I question the birth order thing. Did they fit data into what they believed it should be? And then it was like, oh, yeah. Kind of like, astrology signs and how we go, oh, yeah, that's so me. But then I look at other ones and I go, but that's me too. And that's me too, So sometimes I
I
wonder.
think there's like personality characteristics that are true for like firstborns of very large families, but that's not true of all firstborns, right? So it gets a little slippery. Anybody else? Okay, well, I
I have a
appreciate.
question. I saw you on mute earlier. Go ahead.
No, I didn't have a
Safe
question.
space.
I don't have any questions. I was just going to thank you also as an adoptive mom. But like, I just think it is so important. Like you always hear like how like the newborn stage and infancy and bonding is so important. And you hear it all the time, but you never actually like see it or know it or understand it. And even I would say I was probably naive to it until we started seeing like a lot of mental health struggles in one of our kiddos. And it just goes to show like, I really don't think it is like people say it, but saying it and like having knowledge on it and acting on it is so different. And so thank you for doing this. And it just is, it's very detrimental to children.
Yeah. Well, I definitely understand that the struggle for secure attachment when children have been adopted. It's a different world. Yeah. So good luck to you.